Hey guys, welcome to the channel VIBGYOR of Talents. So in today's video, we are going to look at a very interesting chapter and one of my favorite chapter, Control and Coordination. It's a chapter 7 in class 10 NCERT textbook. So by hearing these words, control and coordination, what first comes to your mind? So the control and coordination is something related to movement because for movement we need both control and coordination to work together, then only we can move. So what do you see moving? Do you see any non-living objects moving around you? Like when you try to sit on a chair, it starts to see you and it runs away from you? Does it? So if it does, it's a magical chair. Can you give it to me too? Or just kidding, leave it. So there is movement in organisms only. We cannot see anything else moving except in movies and some comics too. Okay, so the ability of organisms to move certain body parts is known as movement in short. So we have learned about movement and we have already known about movement in the previous classes. And when they move from one place to another, this is known as locomotion of these organisms. And why do even these organisms move? These organisms show movements in response to stimuli. For example, you are sitting here and your mom tries to slap you. You just simply bend your head to escape from that slap. So this is response to stimuli. You show movement in response to stimuli. As simple as it. Okay, now let's move on. And let's look at the introduction of this chapter. So, organisms move in response to various kinds of stimuli like light, heat, nutrients or food, mate, etc. I've just set you an example of your mom hitting you. This is also a response to stimuli for us. And if you take the consideration of light, then when you are coming from a dark room to a dull room, then it's kind of response to stimuli because your pupil needs to adjust to the brightness. So it takes some time. So this is a response to stimuli. And when your mom is making your favorite food in the kitchen and she just went out of the kitchen and you got the smell of it and you just ran into the kitchen and thought to taste it. You put your hand into the hot bowl which was just on the stove and your hand burned very severely and you started crying. But what happened as soon as you put your fingers or the hand into the bowl? You removed your hand from the bowl into it as soon as possible, right? You don't want it to get burnt more severely. So this is the response to stimuli. Cool, isn't it? All the activities in animals is controlled and coordinated by two major systems. So what are these two major systems? Number one is the nervous system and the number two is endocrine system. So only these two help in controlling and coordinating all our movements from waking up to sleeping again in the night. So these are working very hard to keep your body parts continuously moving. So let's dedicate this entire chapter for this nervous and endocrine system. So the hormones are chemical messengers which assist the nervous system in carrying out various functions. So what are these hormones? These hormones are nothing but the substances or the liquids which are released by the endocrine glands. These endocrine glands are basically the part of the endocrine system. These endocrine glands release the hormones to help the nervous system in giving some extra help for it to work more properly. They both work together to help us indeed. And there are various types of hormones which are being released in our body every minute and every second. And also there are many glands which secrete these hormones into our body. Let's look at these hormones and glands furthermore in the chapter more deeply. Okay, so as in we human beings, we have the nervous system and endocrine system. Even plants want something to coordinate their movement, right? So in plants also there is endocrine system. the hormones in plant help the coordinate its movements. Our body is very complex, so we require two systems, the nervous system and the endocrine system. But for plants, the hormones are just enough because they are not as complex as we humans. Okay, so now let's start with the nervous system. The nervous system is basically made of many neurons. Neurons are just small cells. The neuron is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. And this is how a neuron looks like. It looks very complex, right? Yes, it does, because it has to transmit all the information from one end of the body to another. It should spread all across the body and make sure all the movements are in right control and they are all coordinated. So now let's have a deeper look at this neuron and let's learn about the different parts of this neuron. So each neuron has three main parts. The dendrite is the number one, and cyton or soma, as you can observe here, and it is also known as cell body, and you also observe something known as axon. So let's look at the function of each of them. So these dendrites receive impulses from other neurons, and this cyton or soma processes the impulse which it receives, and this axon terminates the impulse either to another neuron or to muscles or any other glands or any else. And the axon may be myelinated or non-myelinated. The impulse transmission is faster in the myelinated neurons. So what is the meaning of this myelinated? It's just covered with something known as myelin sheath. So this is all about the neurons. And let's look at the nervous system now. And in the nervous system, it is again divided into two main parts. That is the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So what is the difference between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system? The basic difference is that the central nervous system just consists the brain and the spinal cord, whereas the peripheral nervous system just consists of all other neurons that are being attached, and they are spread all throughout the body. All the nervous system except the brain and the spinal cord is known as peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, they process the information, whereas the peripheral nervous system, they carry and transmit the information from one part to another. And let's look at each of them, the central and peripheral nervous systems now. Let's start off with the central nervous system. As I said you, the central nervous system is made up of two parts. What are they? The brain and the spinal cord. So first of all, let's look at the complex structure that you see here, Mr. Brain. So this brain has many parts which all function tirelessly. So let's look at the function of each of them. The functions of different parts of the brain are as follows. So first up, the cerebrum is responsible for reasoning, logic, emotions, speech, memory, visual processing, recognition of auditory and taste stimuli, and many other functions. So the cerebrum is very important in a human brain. And then comes the cerebellum. So this cerebellum regulates and coordinates the body movements, posture and balance, which is very important. And then the pons relays signals from hindbrain to forebrain. And then the medulla oblongata controls all involuntary movements like vomiting, sneezing, yawning, heartbeat, breathing, blood pressure, etc. So do you think of doing any of these before? You just can't even imagine of them, but then you just do it without actual conscious of your body. Like heartbeat. Now you are not wantonly doing heartbeat, you cannot even stop the heartbeat, but it's just moving on. This is all because the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata continues as the spinal cord, which runs through the vertebral column, and it controls the reflex action. So the spinal cord is all dedicated to control the reflex actions, because the nervous system can't go, the neurons can't travel the information all around the body to the brain. It takes time. So during reflex action, we need quick actions have to be taken. So the information is passed to the spinal cord and it takes the decision rather than brain during the reflex actions. And then we are done with the central nervous system. Now let's move on to the peripheral nervous system. The nerves which are given out by the brain and the spinal cord form the peripheral nervous system. In short, PNS. So there are 12 cranial nerves and 31 spinal nerves in us humans. Interesting, right? And this peripheral nervous system is again divided into another two types of nervous system known as somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Let's look at them now. So let's look at somatic nervous system first off. The somatic nervous system is a part of the PNS, that is peripheral nervous system, as we discussed, and the nerves of the PNS that control the voluntary actions of the body form the somatic nervous system. As simple. So which do the voluntary actions which we do in conscious, that is known as somatic nervous system. And then something opposite to it is the autonomic nervous system. So all the nerves of the PNS that control the involuntary actions in the body form the autonomic nervous systems. And here we are. The two divisions of autonomic nervous systems are sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So again, this autonomic is divided into two. As I said you, that they are sympathetic and parasympathetic. So these sympathetic nervous systems prepares the body for intense physical activity, and it is often referred to as the fight or flight response. Well, the parasympathetic nervous system has almost the exact opposite effect and relaxes the body and inhibits or slows many high energy functions. So in here we have something known as fight or flight. So what do you mean by that? So again, let's take an example. You are back in time and you just went for a tour and there were dinosaurs in the time, remember? So, and then you were camping in the night and just a dinosaur saw you from a far distance and you also saw it and it started running behind you. What will you do? Then simply your body starts reflex action, the autonomic nervous system starts working, and then it prepares you to fight or flight. So fighting means if you are really brave and if you think that you can destroy the dinosaur, then you go and try to fight it, which is very complex. But then flight, it is more easier, I guess, just running away. For running away also, you need so much of energy rather than before, so that you can escape from the dinosaur and save your life. So that is nothing but fight or flight. Okay, let's move on in this peripheral nervous system. So this is just a mind map for your reference so that it would be more easier for you to remember all this stuff easily. So first up we have nervous system, then it is branched into two parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Inside the central nervous system we have the brain and the spinal cord, which are the decision making bodies of our body. And then in here the PNS, the peripheral nervous system, is again divided into two parts, the somatic nervous system, that is voluntary, and autonomic nervous system, involuntary. So these two are quite opposite. And again, the autonomic is divided into two parts, as I said you, the sympathetic nervous system, arousing, and the parasympathetic nervous system, the calming. Again, these two are quite opposite. Okay, let's move on in the peripheral nervous system itself, and then reflex action. So we have been speaking about the reflex action from the start of the chapter. So the reflex action is a sudden involuntary action of the body in response to stimuli. We have discussed about the mom slapping and putting the hand inside the hot dish. These are all the reflex actions. So during a reflex action we need an immediate response, which is known as the reflex arc. So it is the path followed by the electrical impulse during a reflex action. The impulse travels from the receptor organ to the spinal cord or brain, and then it is processed there and the information is brought back to the concerned muscle to carry out the action which is needed as soon as possible. Thus, The receptor organ, the sensory or afferent neuron, or the interneuron, motor afferent neuron, and the effector neuron are all the components of a reflex arc. So let's look at the reflex arc visually. So this is how it looks like. So when your hand touches a hot burning candle, the information is passed to the efferent neuron or the sensory neurons, then it is passed to the spinal cord. The spinal cord tells the decision to the motor neurons or the efferent neurons, and then it passes it to the muscle, which is known as the effector, and then it tries to pull up the hand so that your hand won't burn. This is reflex arc. And then we have to protect this CNS because it's very important. So the brain is basically protected by three main layers. Number one is the bony skull, which is very strong, and then the cerebrospinal fluid for the cerebellum, and then the meninges. It is made up of dura mater, anchronoid, and pia mater. These are not actually necessary, this is just extra information. The protection of the CNS. So that's it, we are done with the nervous system. And remember the format in the mind map that I have showed you before. It becomes very easier to remember everything. You can just open the mind map and just see it before the exam to get good marks and remember it properly. So that is it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching the video, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications, and we'll continue this chapter in the next parts, and it would be very interesting, so stay tuned. And also please make sure to follow us on Discord, Twitter and Instagram to get the latest updates. And in the description I'll also leave the notes of this chapter so it would be helpful to you. And thank you once again for watching. Have a great day.